Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Simon Yeo. So real and honor, Simon has a massive martial arts background. He's a 15-degree black belt in Bujinkan Jiu-Jitsu and also a Roger Gracie black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's the real thing. He's trained in all kinds of things, lots of trips to Japan. He's got a best-selling book called The Secret Art of the Ninja, a student of Hatsumi Sensei, who's extremely well-known in the martial arts world. And joining us from London today, Simon?
Yes, yeah, I'm at home in London.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
What was the beginning of your journey? How did you get interested in the body and movement?
So the beginning was, well, let's go back before the beginning, actually, because it's kind of odd. Well, I find it odd. When I was at school from sort of age, I guess, 8 to 13, I was a massive football, cricket, rugby kind of guy in the first teams in all of those. And I left and I went to the sort of more grown-up school at 13, and on the curriculum was judo. And immediately, and I'm still not quite sure what drove me so strongly to go there was I just gave everything up, literally, and just did judo for 5 years, 3 times a week, and that's all I did. I was obsessed with it. And then after that, leaving school, I went on to do karate, kung fu, taekwondo, which I did with Ebi Ganso, who was in the Olympic team when taekwondo was like the sort of new sport for the Olympics. I can't remember what the technical name for that was, but anyway, that's what it was. And then I had contact with people like you and Briscoe in that kind of arena. And then all the while, in the background was ninja books by either Hatsumi Sensei or Stephen Hayes.
Yeah.
To go into as a young man, go into in before the time of internet book buying, go into the martial arts shops and thumb through the different arts to see that you're not missing out on anything. And
I used to do that same thing before YouTube. It was like, what's this? I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's like used to spend hours doing that, but as I say, the thing that kept on coming back and kept on intriguing me was Hatsumi Sensei's books and Stephen Hayes' books at the time. So I think it was 87. I started training in the Bujinkan system, which is the Japanese Grandmasters system, and by I think early 90s, I'm trying to think when was the first trips to see the Grandmaster himself. But anyway, then all through the 90s, making multiple trips to see the Grandmaster, even in Japan, or when he was traveling the world teaching 3-day seminars, which were called taikais. Sadly, he stopped doing that now because of his age, but I used to spend maybe, see him 5 or 6 times a year at some stages. Had a lot of intense training at a time when he was the sort of strong sort of middle-aged man, where he's using his technique and his power like in a devastating fashion. Nowadays, of course, because of his age, he's training at his age and he's more perhaps interested in the sort of technical, super sensitive sides to the art, which sometimes, in my opinion, practicality is a little lost, or certainly you're not going to get the practicality without having gone through this hard stage of training. So it must be difficult, I'd say, for newcomers to the art to jump on the bandwagon now and only see this very soft way. You mentioned earlier that you do Aikido. I think this is sort of
There's an analogous story with those Sensei, the fan of Aikido, that, it might shock some listeners, but martial artists often are sort of said to peak in their 40s or 50s, which is going to sound very old to some people out there who are used to football players peaking at sort of late 20s or whatever. And equally, what can happen as they become little old men is that sometimes they do, keep growing in excellence, but often there's a sort of journey into the abstract or the super sensitive, which certainly interesting.
I think because when you start to lose your your power, because as much as we fight against this concept of that power and strength should not be part of martial arts training, it is. I think when obviously technique should override power, but when people of a similar level, power is going to be the defining point. And also, power can buy you, if you're bigger and stronger, can buy you a bit in the way of negating someone else's technique. So it's something that shouldn't be lost, because I notice that a lot of people, particularly in my art, don't really keep themselves in very good physical condition.
Yeah.
But and that's fine if your ambition is only to repeat historical movement and stuff like that and study that. But if you have any ambition to self-defense and stuff, I think physical conditions are a vital part of it.
Yeah, I think you can go too far one way or the other with this, can't you? In terms of martial arts. And maybe another factor is, as teachers get older, their students, they're so, particularly in Japanese culture, and Hatsumi Sensei is one of the most respected teachers in the world of any martial art. And there's such respect that students start sort of jumping for them. It's very difficult to genuinely test, I'd say, a teacher that has that much prestige.
So the other piece, this is a very interesting point here. So Hatsumi Sensei always talks about taking the art and making it appropriate. He says, I'm teaching what I'm teaching here, but the senior instructors should take it away and make it appropriate for the area that they live in. So obviously in America, there'll be a slant towards maybe guns and knives. Here, there's probably more unarmed combat and knives as well, as we're seeing at the moment, unfortunately, with the rise in knife crime, apparently. So that's one point. The other point, the other point is because these people, as you say, sort of become fall down ukes, and they're so respectful, they don't attack him in a realistic way of being balanced, maybe using more like a boxing type of striking attacks, which I think is you're more likely, certainly in the UK, I think you're more likely to encounter on the streets. So I think it's, once your starting point is off, then nothing good is going to really come out of it afterwards. And I think perhaps to a degree, Hatsumi Sensei and his senior Shihan have almost given up asking people to attack them realistically, or alternatively, they use this sort of extended punching system that we use in our system to demonstrate a technique. But of course, that's the beginning. It's for people like me, and what I do is I take away the technique that the grandmaster is trying to show, and then go, okay, how do I make it work from a boxing style punch?
Yeah. So I just want to draw out a couple of things there.
And reflecting it.
Want to draw out this? We're going to so geek out for the next hour. This is fantastic. I can just see we're going to have a great conversation.
You've got me going now.
But seriously, this is what I want to geek out about at the moment. So, I mean, a couple of things for listeners. I think one, just to highlight what you said about making your practice whatever, whether it's yoga. If I see someone doing acrobatic yoga, I'm like, okay, is this age specific? Is this actually helping in your life? Right? Like, what are the actual challenges that you have to face? And we'll look at health, I think, later on. And the second thing there, we're going to come back to, I hope, the kind of application of the modern versus the traditional, because I think that pops up in many arts in different ways. So like people listening to this not from a martial arts background, you can listen for the analogies here, because it really goes across yoga and dance and other things. And in Aikido, we might start off with this stepping lunge punch, which is a very unrealistic kind of attack. But it's
exactly what I'm talking about.
Place to start from in terms of working, right? As long as you then, if it's necessary for your life,
you extrapolate it out.
Yeah, take that to work. So we better start off. We've kind of jumped in, saying what
we've nerded out too quick.
We geeked out right away. But in terms of ninjutsu, some people are going to have images of, the stereotypical Hollywood ninja in the black pajamas sneaking around throwing stuff.
Yeah, that is a Hollywood image.
You're the real deal, man. So it's like, tell us what is ninjutsu?
So the image that you see there is actually the Hollywood image. So if you were trying to hide yourself, the best way to hide yourself is in plain sight. So mostly ninjas that were conducting espionage kind of missions were dressed in gardeners. Yeah, exactly. So the idea of the guy wearing the black suit and stuff, I think comes from the kabuki theatres of Japan, where they have the people working backstage and stuff, obviously because they don't want to be seen wearing these black suits so they can move invisibly.
As they still do in theatre. Yeah,
yes, yeah. So whether in actual fact these ninja missions were conducted, there is some talk about wearing these kind of suits and stuff, but I think mostly the suits are actually like a burgundy colour, because black on its own, when in the shadows, is actually too intense.
Okay.
So it actually stands out more than maybe a burgundy or a dark bluey colour.
Okay.
So I think that's actually to sort of destroy everyone's illusions of it, and sort of.
It's rather stylish. That suits
yeah, but, the suits are not really possible. I personally try and discourage. If someone asks me if they can come and learn from in my class and wear masks and stuff, I'm not that impressed, to be honest.
So, what were they? The historical ninja then? So, as I understand it, they were sort of assassins.
Well, this is kind of it's up for debate. I think there's a huge debate about all these different things, but what I gather basically is that they were a sect, if you like, of people living outside society in the mountains of hills and hills of Japan. They had a different belief system to the ruling classes of the samurai and the shogun, etc. And so, much is seen today. If you have a different belief system, you get persecuted.
Many of them are Christian, right? That's the sort of funny thing here.
Yeah. So I think they're persecuted, and so they learned how to build. So also within that, so I'm jumping a bit. Within that, then they had there were battles going on in China, and some of the soldiers and martial arts from China were beat on from the losing sides, fled to the mountains of Japan. So then they started to have a close proximity with these sort of martial artists from China that taught. Because if you look at some of the schools in the Bujinkan system, a lot of them kind of look a bit quite Chinese. From the Chinese stuff that I did before, it looked quite Chinese, and sort of circular movement and things like that. There's certain traits that you can see. Go, wow, that looks like something I learned in Kung Fu. So that's the reason for that. But then equally, so they became adept at learning these martial arts, but also living close to nature, because they were isolated in the mountains of Japan. But also the land only could sort of allow a certain number of people to sort of live off it, if you like. So obviously the families grew, and then people had to go elsewhere for jobs and income, and literally just not to be there, to be somewhere else. But obviously then, because these little families are spreading out all over Japan, it became a very sort of reliable spy network. So that's really where a lot of this sort of espionage / spying comes from, is because it was just, let's phone up Uncle so and so and see what's coming to the harbour, and so wherever in Japan, he was living there, working there, so he could just take a trip down to the harbour, have a look, and report back. It became a very reliable sort of network, if you like, and I think that's where most of it came out of, and sort of obviously being persecuted and having to live off your wits, and they didn't have the ability to have samurai swords, which were made to a very high standard.
Yes, it's a different lineage than the kind of samurai type lineage, isn't it? Completely different.
Although in what's interesting in the Bujinkan, so everyone associates Hatsumi Sensei's teaching with ninjas, but the reality of it is there's only 3 ninja schools in his system. The rest, the other 6, are samurai schools.
Oh, because he's actually a lineage holder of a number of schools, isn't he? It's not just one. Yeah. And is there a direct lineage back to the historical ninja? Because it sort of seemed like it came out of nowhere.
Again, this is up for debate. Some people say ardently that he's kind of made it up or whatever. Other people will say that the scrolls date back 1,000 years from one grandmaster to the next, and he's there with an unbroken lineage. I don't really know. I've not seen the scrolls. I don't read Japanese. I don't really know. But what I have done is I've seen him, and he is an excellent, in my opinion, martial artist, and that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, me too. This sort of claims of historical accuracy. In some ways, it's nice. There's a lot of bullshit out there. And at the end of the day, it's like how good's the teacher?
he's imparted on me loads of wisdom that served me well through the majority of my life now. When I watch what he's doing, I think, whereas now I think sometimes, okay, that's, but what it gives you an idea, or it can go, wow, I wish I could do that. But most importantly, what he gives me material or seeds which then grow in me, and I have to play with and work with. And he gives me something, he gives me inspiration, I think is the best way of putting it. He shows me how to link techniques in a way that I would never consider. And as I say, I think he's a fantastic martial artist, and I just want to learn from him. I think he's...
Can you give us an example of a seed, as you say? This is a concept that I have some awareness of, but
well, it's an interesting thing. I think the first thing to consider is that you can meet someone for a limited amount of time, for a minute, and they can say one thing to you.
Yeah.
And that will start off the growth in you. So the imparting of that one phrase or that one sentence can start you off on a line to nowhere. I'm trying to actually think of something specific. He says that the thing with what I remember in a general way with what he says. Yes, I'll tell you something specific now. So he was saying the trouble when you're training martial arts is everyone tries to get too complicated, and what they actually need to do is, when it starts to not work, they need to go back and do what we call the Kion Hapo and the Sanshin no Kata, which is the fundamental basics. So what he's saying is he's saying on a martial arts term is, when you start to feel that some of the new technique is failing to work properly, it's more of an indication that your basics are flawed, and that this concept of not being able to building very high if the foundations are rocky or unstable. But obviously this, for me in business has meant that at times I've had some particularly one successful business, and then you start to try and diversify into something else that's slightly outside that, and then it affects everything. And so at that time I've reeled it in. I've gone, okay, that new bit of business, I don't really know what I'm doing. We could get rid of that, and now let's just go back to the core business.
Yeah, with you. I'm with you on that. Like, what's my core business? I keep asking with my business advisor. I sit down and say, okay, what do I really do? What am I good at?
And what works? What do we know that really works? And now let's work on that and work on the principles based around that, and then start to build back up again.
Yeah, I mean, what works?
It doesn't mean that it's going to fail forever. It just means that something wasn't as good as it could be, whether it's a realization of some particular point, or it's or in physical terms, it means that some aspect of your body movement is not robust enough.
Yeah, and in terms of kind of what works, that brings us on to something I've heard you talk about elsewhere that we were just talking about before we started recording, which I think is critical. That to listeners, there's two sort of main types of martial arts out there. There's the ones that sort of test things, particularly on one end through sport, or on the other end through kind of maybe an MMA competition or a judo competition. There's a whole way of testing things. And then there's others that are more form-based or kata-based, which used to be the sort of more traditional way. And you're trained in a kata system, which is the ninjutsu, which is like Aikido or much traditional karate, for example. But you've also done a lot of the sparring type stuff, like the kind of knockdown karate, and particularly Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which was the one that really wiped the floor with everything else in the 90s.
Yeah, and I do Muay Thai as well. At the moment, I'm also studying Muay Thai. Because I actually quite enjoyed that contact side of stuff. I felt that it was limiting me. My Bujinkan training was, it all becomes a bit it's like I always say to people, you can't be a dry land swimmer.
Yeah,
you can be swimming as much as you want and lie on a chair and practice the strokes and stuff. But at the end of the day, you can't really be a good swimmer until you get in the water.
And there's a lot of fantasy around this, isn't it? Just traditional.
There's so much fantasy around it, and how people, armchair critiques of, even some of the top level people, dare I say it, people like Stephen Hayes, he's obviously realised that there's a hole in the Bujinkan system because, probably a bit like Aikido, they come out of old arts, they come out of battlefield arts. It'd be like weapon-based battlefield arts. So a lot of the time, the people wearing armour, they had, you know, swords, blah, blah, blah. Last thing you ever wanted to do is be on the ground, fighting with someone on the ground, because someone's either going to run you through with a spear or a sword and you're going to be dead pretty quickly. You're like a tortoise upside down. So this meant that historically, from those schools, that people didn't really study to any great depth being on the ground, because you just wanted to avoid being there. You didn't want to fight people there. You didn't want to try and break limbs or something on the ground. You just want to get back to your feet as fast as you can, really. So then along comes Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, etc., Kosen Ryu Judo. And nowadays, people will willingly take you on the ground to damage you or choke you or whatever. And I think if you don't get that into your system or put it into this, you know, it again depends if you're there to learn self-defense or not. But if you are there to learn self-defense, it's vital that you study this aspect, because it is clearly going to be missing in some of these older arts.
Yeah, I did a year of BJJ, just rolling around on the floor, and even just doing a year of it, which I don't regard as a lot, a few times a week. It's a really good trainer called a really good trainer in Brighton, and you know, that just revolutionized kind of how I thought about martial arts from just you, and the idea of sort of testing things. My friend Rockus is an Aikido black belt, and he's been going through his whole he's a big YouTuber, and he's been going through this whole journey of realizing a lot of his Aikido just doesn't work. And it's getting a lot of...
Is that the guy that got in the ring with the MMA fighter?
Exactly, yeah. He's in Lithuania.
I think what he's doing is awesome. I think
it's really honest, isn't it? And
I think absolutely hats off to him. You know, I had that epiphany. I was, I think, an 8th degree black belt in the Bujinkan system in early 2000s, and I went to the Gracie Academy, and I think every single person submitted me in the room, except for the white belt that started like about 6 weeks before. I had a massive background in judo, and I thought I knew what I was doing in judo, and it's a different world.
Same thing. 12 years of Aikido, choked out by everyone, and interestingly, after 6 months, I could easily choke out anyone who'd walked in for their first class.
Yes, exactly.
But also,
so, you know, you see it's right in front of your face. This is actually real. You know, you get real abilities. It's not all, you know, you're never guessing whether does that work or does it not work. You know, I had a guy who's actually a yoga teacher who's a black belt under me. And I remember he got his 1st degree black belt, and an MMA guy came in to train with us. He wanted to learn for his coming up fights and grappling, or improve his grappling stuff. And this guy was huge. You know, he's like 6'3", and nearly the same across. And this guy is probably 5'8". No, probably a bit taller than that. 5'10". He's gone on to be quite a successful, as I say, yoga teacher in London now. And you could see, I said, okay, you know, go with this guy. And you could see my black belt going, oh no, you know what, we're going to get fucking squashed now. And literally my guy just took him apart, you know, and just went from one submission to the next, tap, you know, shook hands, started again, tapped, guy tapped again, and over and over again. And I don't think the guy got him at all. Yeah. And so I think I was talking to him afterwards. I said, just think back now from when you were first arrived in my class. I said to him, if you went with that guy, you would have thought he would kill you, wouldn't he? He said, yeah. And he said, I thought he would kill me today. And I said, look what you've learned. You know, you made it. You know, you turned him upside down and turned him inside out. It's like, you know, the techniques work. They're good and they're efficient.
And this is sort of modernism or scientific kind of modernist way of thinking, catching up with kind of medieval thinking and a kind of fundamental way of thinking. Essentially, it's a big mentality change. And in some ways, martial arts is fortunate because we have these tests, even if they're imperfect. You know, you can't, and it's not anything goes, right? But other arts, like in yoga, there might be a difference of opinion about a breathing technique or the best way to do Tadasana. And it's very difficult to test that. Like you can postural checks and things. I think like in martial arts, there's this kind of, okay, well, let's see, let's roll, you know?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think that's important. You know, I think the truth, you know, like everything, you know, I before we started, I was talking about the specific art of lying. which is called kyojitsu. And the way of kind of often discerning what the truth is to look between the middle of what you're hearing, and you get a middle line. So again, this argument about kata and sparring, both in the extremes, are wrong. Somewhere in the middle, in my opinion, is where the truth is. So the truth is that I think if you want to improve technique-wise, you have to drill technique and you have to do kata or whatever. You have to drill it. Sparring then pressure tests it. But if you only spar, you will only more or less stay after a while at roughly the same level as you are. It's very hard to bring in new technique into your game when you're under pressure the whole time. It's known for to simulate things when it's under pressure.
There's no pressure.
Yeah. So equally, if you only do kata, then you never really work on how to make it work when the person's resisting. And that's also a big issue, is when, it's all very good going with the compliant uke, but
so
when
practice partner for listeners.
Yeah. So if you go with a totally compliant practice partner, it's not going to be like that. And you have to know how to flow or use nagare to get between different techniques, and you won't find that just from kata.
Yeah. And it also strikes me that, the danger of kind of competition is that there's always stuff taken out. Like there's no knives in BJJ, you're rolling around on the floor, but it's like their mates are not kicking you in the head, or, flick knife. Do you know what I mean? There's this other...
that's very true. Although I think there's a worse... So I think you're going to lose out more by hiding behind that fallacy than you are by going... So what I'd say is the best thing you can do is you can go, okay, let's accept that we have to test this in with certain rules. Guess what? If someone's trying to stick a thumb in my eye, weirdly, I'm going to be able to do the same thing. So, this idea that if you're governed by rules, you will only be able to fight by those rules if someone attacks you on the street, I think is a little bit flawed.
Yeah, I think it's an escape for traditional martial artists. I can punch you in the groin with my death punch, and I'm like, well, no, you wouldn't. You wouldn't have a chance. And even if, even if that is a flaw in a certain sparring system, at least they've swum in the water, Yeah,
exactly. I think you've got more to gain by learning how to use techniques against resisting opponents than not doing it at all.
Nice. And you also mentioned the art of lying, which is, might be tremendously. I'm fascinated by that. I'm a terrible liar, so I'd love to learn that. And the other thing is that ninjutsu just has this incredibly broad syllabus, right? Like tying people up and smoke. Just shit that you're just not.
Some of the stuff, to be honest with you, I've not been taught. And also some of the stuff I have been taught, but I don't focus on very much anymore. So my focus really is on unarmed fighting, along with edged weapons like knife and sword, mainly because a sword moves in a similar arc as a baseball bat or something like that. A hambo, which is like a walking stick, and I kind of more or less leave it there, and maybe along with some of the flexible weapons like the Manriki Kasari, which is a chain with two weights on the end. So
Simon, if you don't say throwing stars, listeners will cry.
Actually, what we don't do is we don't use throwing stars. Actually, we use it because that's relatively easy. But I do teach the bow shuriken from time to time, which is like a nail, but without
much easier.
It's a harder thing to throw, and it requires more skill.
But then there's things even outside of traditional martial arts. Like obviously, ninjas are sort of famous for hiding and deception. Camouflage. I mean, swimming underwater. There's an incredible range of skills, as far as I can tell.
And I've got a video on I think how to swim or swim on the water, on top of the water, wearing armour, for example. And in fact, there's a whole series by one of them.
So useful if you fall in the Thames, you don't your iPhone wet.
Exactly.
Keep your iPhone above you as you swim one-handed.
So you can see already that some of the stuff is, whereas it's interesting for historical purposes, I feel there's so much to learn that's relating to.
It's useful.
Yeah, it's useful. But I haven't got the time to spend on the as much as I kind of interested and like the other stuff. I'm fascinated about how people have devised these techniques and stuff on the way and the intricacies of how to use like a bow staff or a naginata, which is a 6 foot stick with a katana blade on the end of it. I don't think I'm ever going to use it. I don't think I'll probably be attacked by someone. Someone said, well, what happens if someone picks up a broom? I said, well, I've got the stuff I do with the walking stick that I'm focusing on will probably help me there. But, you only have so much time, and I have a lot more time than most people. So, I've always had this theory, it's better to be really good at a few things rather than shit at a lot of things.
Yes, absolutely. And as you say, it's got to be matched to your actual life, right? So there's the realities of sort of potential self-defense situations in London.
I'd like to do more with, to be honest with you, I used to be a member of a pistol shooting club until it got outlawed. But, if I was in America, I'd be probably into that. Because,
lots of gun disarms and things. And
And
if you're a special forces guy being trained by Hatsumi, that's different. If you're police, that's different again, because you can't kill people.
Anywhere around the world is different. But you're right to say that if you're a policeman or special forces or even just a soldier, your requirements are going to be different.
And also Japan, people don't realize, is an incredibly safe country. So most people training there.
Yes.
I mean, I'm going to be there in a couple of months, and my secretary said, "Oh, do you want me to book you a taxi to make sure it's all safe?" I'm like, Aggie, it's Tokyo. Yeah. No one's going to mug me. It's fine.
Walk around anywhere at 4 a.m. and nothing will happen.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different situation than if you're living in the ghetto somewhere. And all these broad things, you're focusing on what happens. I mean, health is one of the big ones, right? Like, I listened to another interview of you, and you spoke very nicely, saying, most people are worried about self-defense. They take up martial arts and they hurt themselves doing martial arts.
So, that's a very interesting concept as well, because as you rightly said, a lot of people go, "Oh, I'm going to be, I might get attacked." So what I need to do is prepare myself and so I don't get hurt or injured by someone else. But then they take up a type of martial art, but through the mechanics of the movement patterns that are inbuilt in that art, they actually damage themselves. So, you can see this a lot with the sort of flicking legs with kicks. Muay Thai is quite good because you kind of use the hips to kick. But I think some of the other arts that you flick out the knee leads to like endless overextension injury to the knee. And then you see a lot of their practitioners hobbling around at age 30 or 35 and their bodies are done in.
Simon's Aikido, people walk around on their knees, a Suwawaza, and every single Aikido instructor has bad knees, and they won't fucking admit that it's come from this very obviously awful thing to do.
Yeah, it's a strange thing though, because I started, I did judo when I was very young, but I started doing the Gracie system, and I don't know if this is part of my Chinese heritage or something like that, but I've never had any problems with my knees. Obviously, needless to say, I've spent a lot of time on my knees studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
I should just say for listeners that you can't see Simon. He's Chinesey looking. So even though he sounds English, he grew up in England, as far as I can tell. Americans sometimes think all English people are kind of white and wear bowler hats. So you're from an Oriental family that you grew up in.
Yeah, my father's from Hong Kong and my mother's English. But I've never had any problems. But I have to say, a lot of people that started around the time that I did have all had like knee surgery, problems with that. I did make a choice once I got past the first grade in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that I was going to spend my time training with the sort of elite black belts, and they have more considered movement patterns, I think, and so that my legs weren't getting twisted and bent by accident. They do in some classes when it's a sort of a win at all costs kind of spar you get there. I was tending to spar with people that would absolutely beat me up, but they would do it in a very nice way without permanently damaging me.
Yeah, I'll just draw out a couple of things here. So the first is there are ethnic differences in anatomy. And this is very unpolitically correct to talk about, but it's like, well, of course there are. If people look different on the outside, their anatomy is different in other ways. Like Indians have quite different knees. If you're a yogi, this is worth bearing in mind. And the hips of certain people from West Africa or Afro-Caribbeans in the UK are quite different. There are quite clearly establish like anatomical differences. And this is worth noting if you're a teacher of any art. If you know, like London was ethnically diverse, it's worth knowing about.
Yeah. The thing I noticed with myself is that I've got insane ankle flexibility, so I can get my shins pretty close to the top of my feet. But I think this is one of the reasons that little things, this sort of, that when I was doing karate, that I think they almost gave up on people who were being able to punch from the natural standing position of feet shoulder width apart and just step forward and punch without turning the back foot out, because Westerners don't have, or most Westerners don't have, that ankle flexibility. They also don't have that flexibility to go down into that sort of crouching, sitting, eating position.
Yeah, the Seiza position, a lot of struggle with. And
not Seiza, you know, when you're squatting down.
Oh, I see, the squat. I mean, this.
You see a lot of Oriental people eating their rice.
Yes.
Position.
The talus bone in the ankle, like it's not flexibility, it's in the calf.
Well, I don't know because there's a chap in the Bujinkan who spotted this and he goes, I'm one of those people, I don't have the ankle flexibility. Yeah. And he's worked on his ankle and he's now got he's pretty much got the flexibility. I have that naturally. I don't have to stretch or do anything to have that. It just happens. But he has done something, and he reckons it is because Westerns don't use that ankle so much that it gets. I don't know
There's both. I mean, I've studied this a little bit because one of my yoga teachers is a big anatomist, and there's definitely people where the talus bone is just simply in a position that it's not going to happen. And then there's other people who can learn, you know, things like the squat. It's to do with the length of your femur, the position of your hips. Yeah. Paul Grilly is excellent on this from the yoga point of view. He shows he gets different bones and shows you how they're different. It's well worth looking at Paul Grilly anatomy. Yeah. He'll show you different femur bones and say, look, this is why they're different.
But and from a punching perspective, so obviously if you're going from standing to punching, if you've got to turn your foot out prior to punching, it's a bit of a giveaway.
Right. Yeah.
You're going to spot that reasonably quickly and go, every time you turn your foot out, guess what? You're going to punch.
Yeah. and you've really studied with the best as well. I mean, you were talking there about how you've done like a lot of one-to-one training, which is unusual. And
so I still do that. I still train twice a week. But what I've always done is had this theory about if I can't train with the source, then I train for the closest thing to the source. Yeah. And so that's what all I've done. So with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I started off my journey with Royce, who's obviously the UFC sort of champion in, I think, 1, 2, and 4, something like that. There was one that he missed out. Then with Roger Gracie and his father, Mauricio Gomez, who were world-renowned people. Roger's probably the greatest Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter of all time. I think he surpasses Hickson and people like that. He's certainly probably I'd say the current family champion, or the best in the family.
He's in London, right? I mean, he's
in London, which is was
Ryan
perfect.
Was training with him. Ryan Spielman, who we had on the show, I think, was doing some
right. Okay. And then within that, I've trained with numerous world champions that have.
Is there anything lost in that? I mean, obviously it's safer because beginners, well, maybe not obviously listeners, but beginners are the ones that tend to hurt you, actually.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely right. The white belts and the blue belts.
Is there anything lost, though, in that you don't?
I don't know, because what I find is, so maybe there is a bit that sometimes certain submission positions weren't as robust as they could be in my training because I wasn't getting there. So I know for a long time that my top game suffered as a consequence because I never used to get to play the top game. I was always be on my back or being squashed. Yeah. But what's the payoff to that is that, really speaking, I've become quite an expert at escaping shit. So if someone's trying to do stuff to me, I'm quite good at getting out of it.
Which in a way is one of the most...
Only because that's all I could do for a long, long time. Is all I could do was try and escape and then go to the next bad position, try and escape from that and then to the next bad position, escape from that. I never really had an opportunity to do what I wanted to do. That's obviously grown because my guard game, because then I was teaching my own class, and I always had this thing about not getting on top of my students and squashing them and what I considered brutalizing them. So I always used to play guard, which is the position off my back, and let them try and attack me, and then use my legs and stuff to either flip them over or whatever, or submit them from that position. So I was very good at playing guard, but it's only in the last five years or so that I've really focused on playing the top game properly.
Yes, the top games where you're mounted on top of someone.
Yeah, exactly.
If people want to sort of imagine, I mean, you can easily Google it, but if you imagine sort of two people rolling around, wrestling on the floor, one on top, one underneath, that's the guard and the mount. Let's talk a little bit about the psychological side here, because ninjutsu has a well-developed psychological side, I hear. I've certainly heard people talking about how they developed certain qualities through Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well. So what do you think are some of the kind of like character traits or psychological skills people can develop through these kind of martial arts?
I don't know. I think so with the I don't know, I've been quite adept at most of this stuff naturally, I think. But one of the things is, we talked about the lying and stuff like that. I'm quite good at seeing through people. People are not being completely honest with me. And I think, weirdly, the people often get that feeling. They can get that feeling that I can see through them. And so they're often very awkward in my company. Yeah. And it's a really strange phenomenon. It's actually, again, struck home about something very personal that's happened in my personal life, which I probably don't really want to get into. But seeing through someone who, on the face of it, looked really, really as if they were a good person. They had everyone's interests at heart and stuff. But when prodded a little bit, because I wasn't quite sure, completely put through the deck on their hand on the floor, and you could see exactly who they were in a heartbeat. And I was, the rest of my family were going, no, that person's absolutely fine. Yeah. I said, I hold reservation. I said, I can't put my finger on it. I can't give you anything quantifiable. I just get a feeling, and the feeling was right as usual. But I could always sense the person's awkwardness with me. And I think that also comes because I think it works two ways. I think not only can I sense that people are not being honest with me, but they can sense I can sense as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's embodied intuition, which I personally think it increases through body awareness, which you're going to have massive.
Yes, I think the gateway to the psychology and the esoterics of anything is through mastering the body. I strongly believe that.
And they are about listening to a partner, right? Like in both ninjutsu and jiu-jitsu, there's listening to the body of the partner.
Yes, yeah. And fitting in with what your partner's doing rather than trying to force them to do what you want to do. So I think, when you begin, you go, right, I want to do this technique on the person, and you try and force it. Often when it's not appropriate, then after a while the partner knows what you're trying to do, and so they just block it. And then as you get more skilled, you start to, as you say, listen to what your partner's doing, and you then react to it. You start to react to what they're doing rather than what you want to do.
Yeah, so that's the Aikido, that's traditionally in Judo, that's in a little bit in Wado-Ryu and Systema, definitely. There's a number of martial arts that are based on that principle of listening and responding, going with flow rather than against it, right? Yeah. And that's just a good one for life, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like when I'm running an interview, it's partly what I want to talk about, it's partly what's just the flow of the guest,
Exactly. And I think that's what makes a good interview, is you pick up on what the person wants to do.
So what other psychological kind of skills or features are part of ninjutsu? I'm just curious as much as anything.
I don't know, do you know about the fifth dan black belt test?
Nope.
That's probably so when you get to fourth dan, you get called up by this Japanese grandmaster, Hatsumi Sensei, and you kneel on the ground. He stands behind you with a shinai, which is like a bamboo sword, so it's flexible, it's not going to kill you or hurt you. Well, it just hurts your pride more than anything else. And he tries to whack you on the head from behind, and you've got to basically not get hit. So you've got to kind of roll out, use your kemi, roll out of the way, and not get hit. So I think it's an innate thing we have in all of us, and I think, but as we get more civilized, we lose these kind of details and stuff like that we used to have. So yeah, that's one of the tests. Is there anything else you would sort of
I'm curious about, like, is it still sort of like, espionage stuff? Is there still stuff around? You talked about the art.
I'm not, I think there was, and there is stuff in his scrolls about that, because he gets given these scrolls by the previous grandmaster, and they've got everything from their period. So in the period where espionage and stuff was valid, and there's a book called the Bansen Shukai, which details all about espionage, how to break into houses and all that kind of stuff. It's not really covered now. You can read up about it and stuff, but it's not really covered now. So I can't.
No. I'm just curious then. I'm thinking, what's most useful for the modern person? Like, for example, there's a teacher in Brighton who has a ninjutsu class for children, and it just looks like really good confidence building as much as anything.
Yes.
Like, what do you, obviously not teaching them to break into houses, but like, what do you think is kind of most useful in terms of our own personal growth, psychological development, emotional development in the martial arts?
I think one of the main things is to be able to look at what you're doing in martial arts and then extrapolate it out into your life. So you don't look at it in the sort of under the microscope of studying a martial art. We talked about this idea that if things aren't working out very well in your life, then go back to the basics, the fundamentals, to the point where it was working really well, and then grow from there again. But not to keep kind of going when things are all rocky and not really working very well.
Nice. This is a sort of model that can be used to look at, like, okay, how does this affect the rest of my life?
Yes, I think that's a very important model. I'm also thinking about such things about learning how to be self-reliant and not really relying on other people to make you feel a certain way.
There's a self-regulation piece, isn't there? There's a sort of stoic piece to martial arts, which is that I can rely on myself.
How some people like go into they can't not be in a relationship because they need someone to make them feel a certain way. I think addressing that is a huge thing. When you're studying martial arts, you have to do it for yourself, otherwise you quickly you have to be responsible for yourself. You can't, when the moment you start going, well, I'm only going to turn up to training if my friend turns up, or you're only going to go so far like that, and then the friend quits, and then you go, okay, well, I'm not going to go anymore. But it's a huge problem, I think, for a lot of people, where they do rely on other people making them feel a certain way. And, you can't go into a relationship to something like marriage, for example, when you rely on someone else to make you feel a way. Otherwise, it's an unfulfillable quest.
Yeah, it's codependency as much as anything. And what have you learned about excellence? Because, these people...
About what, sorry?
Excellence. Like, I know this is an interesting topic. And
so excellence. I think people... I read an interesting book called Stealing Fire, actually, recently, where they talk about this sort of, this area of excellence where you move into an area, and it's covered off in Buddhism as well, where you try and shut down your conscious mind and let your subconscious mind bleed through as much as you possibly can. Once you do that, then you can. The subconscious mind is all knowing. So everything you ever read, seen, or whatever, your brain has assimilated that. It kind of understands. The trouble is accessing it, and the conscious mind spends a lot of time trying to stop you doing that, because it wants to gibber on about what's for dinner. Have I paid this bill? What's going on there? Does my girlfriend still love me? Whatever. It's all this kind of nonsense that you keep flying around. But the way you can sort of start to feel this is like an analogy I can give you is for like a tennis player. So if you've ever played tennis and suddenly someone's fired back a shot and you go, man, I can't really get to that. But you have a go at it and you don't think you let go of everything. You abandon every preconception you've had and you just go, I'm just going to take that shot. And it ends up being like the most awesome shot you've ever played in your life. That is the flow zone, where you've not really thought about it, you've just allowed your body to solve it without thinking about it. And as I say, your subconscious mind knows pretty much everything.
So I'm really
and you have this a lot with different sports, where suddenly you do stuff where you literally think, how do I do that? Because I've never done it before, but your practice has led you to this pinnacle. And it's where you're playing out of you. You know, people talk about playing out of yourself. It's exactly that.
Yeah, in Aikido, we'd always used to joke, you get one good throw a year. There'd be like once a year, you just do a perfect throw. You go, where did that come from? You try and do it again, you couldn't.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And the more you think about it and try and analyze it, the more it will elude you. I had this in judo, and all you're trying to do is to keep hitting that over and over again. So what I've thought about this is the problem is tension, and as we talked about, I think anxiety and stress block you from learning stuff, but also to regurgitate or let your brilliance shine through. So the moment you have stress or anything like that, it stops your brilliance from shining through. So the first thing is to alleviate stress. So how do we alleviate stress? So one of the things, by studying for something like martial arts, we don't have, after a while, a huge anxiety that we're going to be attacked by people. So that's a massive thing that most people don't have. Often people, not so much nowadays perhaps, but in the past, you know, you'd see people walking towards you on the street and stuff, and there's immediately a little bit of anxiety about how, you know, what may or may not happen. I think as martial artists, you have less of that. But the other thing which blocks is obviously not knowing what really you're doing. So there's no quick answer to this. You can't suddenly jump into it. You have to study it first, because then you don't have so much stress about not being able to perform.
Yeah, there's a mastery there, and the best workshop I ever did.
And so then it's through as we talked about, it's through the physical work we start to get mastery of the brain.
Yeah, well, the recipe that I've seen works is something that you're just really well practiced in, and being completely committed but totally non-attached. I did one training in Moscow fairly recently, which just went perfectly. It was just like another level. And my interpreter said afterwards, she said, "What was that? I've never seen you do anything like that before." And we were both sort of stunned. And I looked at the recipe and I thought, well, I knew exactly what I was doing. I'd done it thousands of times before, but I was
abandoning everything and just going, I'm just going to do the.
I just went, fuck it. I wasn't getting paid much. I didn't really care about the outcome. I just, you know what, I'm going to do my best and beyond that. But I was still committed. It wasn't like I didn't care. I really cared, but I was totally not interested in it.
You abandoned yourself to the outcome of what would happen.
Yeah, I just went, fuck it, it's all fine, did my best, and it was amazing. There's something about that. Also had a few friends there, so it was like, it felt quite safe and supportive. So I think that helped relax even more than I might if it was a group of strangers.
Do you see how anxiety and stress block you? So there you set yourself up for this thing about, you had your friends there, so already that's taking away stress. You've done the preparation, that's taken away stress. And then you just went, fuck it, I'll just do my best. And that's when the magic happens, I think.
Yeah.
And it's how to get in, starting to have a formula about how to hit that
regularly.
Like
going to sleep, you can't force it, but you can set the conditions to go to sleep. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Do you find it's like an altered state? Because to me, it was almost like being hypnotized or something. It was a real 2 hours like that.
I think it should be like an almost transcendental state where it's almost you're doing stuff, but you're not thinking about doing it. It's just coming out.
Yeah, I sort of woke up at the end of the workshop. And the interesting thing is my interpreter was caught in the same bubble. And I'd experienced it before in martial arts. She'd never experienced anything like it. And she said, what just happened? Where the last 2 hours gone? And I was just like, I sort of clocked it because I'd had it a bit before. And that, that was one of the longest periods.
But if you're interested in this, read the book Stealing Fire. It goes
Stealing
back to
Fire. Okay. I'll link to that on the notes.
And now the Navy SEALs, I think Microsoft, Google are all using this formula for their CEOs, and how how to, you know, there's many ways. You know, one of the ways is to take psychedelics, which I don't really enjoy, to be honest.
Yeah, not sustainable as well.
Extreme sports, and it's almost, you can put yourself where there's so much pressure, where that you know that if you allow the pressure to get on top of you, you're going to die, and so you just have to abandon it. Yeah, you just have to abandon it, and so it's this abandonment of not, as you say, it's not caring, but it's like the abandonment of what the outcome may or may not be.
Yeah, here it is, Stealing Fire by Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel. So I'll stick a link in the notes there. Okay, we need to wrap up fairly soon.
Okay.
So a couple of things. One, where can people find you? Where can they find your stuff?
Yeah. My website is www.yeodojo.net. You can email me at siYeo@aol.com. And you know, if people are interested, I've got a children's program in London, which I teach during the term and at some half terms.
Dojo, where in London are you based?
That's in Fulham.
In Fulham. Good.
Yeah.
Great.
And we try and teach to the functional parts of the system. So even with my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm more focused on the old school Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which was sort of for Vale Tudo and sort of no holds barred fighting, rather than the more sports stuff. Then, you know, I respect what the sportsmen are doing, but my interest is in the sort of the Helio Gracie original side of the system.
Got it. And do you have a final closing message about the body for listeners?
The answer to all the secrets of the martial arts is to keep training.
Practice. That's the teacher Paul Linden's answers to everything.
Simple formula.
Simon, this was a fantastic geek out. I suspect we could have talked for many hours about martial arts. It's a real treat for me. It's a real honor to have you on. So if you're ever in Brighton, look me up. And
if anyone wants to buy my book, it's great. On Amazon,
so I will put a link to your book.
Esoteric, but it teaches you the fundamentals of the art as well.
What's the book called?
It's called Ninjutsu, The Secret Art of the Ninja by Simon Yeo, Y-E-O.
Okay, Y-E-O. Okay, Simon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for good.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.